the beginning of an unexpected evening. Keanu Reeves walked quietly through the soft glow of a warm evening. The city lights shimmered like stars scattered on the ground, reflecting off the streets after a light drizzle. He was dressed simply. No spotlight on him, no cameras around, just a man carrying years of humility and silence. People often saw him as untouchable, like a star who belonged to another world. But that night, he was only a man with quiet hopes. He had agreed to meet someone whose presence once changed the rhythm of his life. That person was Sandra Bullock. From the outside, it looked like a normal meeting, maybe just two old friends catching up after years apart. But inside Keanu's heart, there was a wave of questions. Why did it feel different this time? Why did the thought of seeing her bring both peace and unease? He remembered their years of working together, the laughter they shared on sets, the way she carried herself with grace, even in the hardest moments. Sandra was not just an actress to him. She was a soul who radiated kindness in every step. The restaurant where they were meeting was hidden from the noise of the city. It was not luxury, not grand, but warm and quiet. It had wooden tables polished by time, candles glowing softly, and music that was gentle enough to let hearts speak louder than words. Keanu arrived first, sitting at the corner table. He always preferred corners, not because he wanted to hide, but because he liked watching others without being watched. His mind drifted as he thought about what this evening might bring. Would it be just nostalgia? Or was there something waiting between the spaces of their conversation? Sandra walked in a few minutes later, her smile as natural as sunlight breaking through clouds. She wore no heavy glamour, just simple elegance, yet every eye in the room noticed her. When she saw Keanu, her smile deepened, and in that moment it felt like time folded back, carrying them to a place where they were younger, freer, and filled with dreams untouched by life's storms. Keanu stood up, greeted her with respect, and pulled the chair for her, a gesture small but powerful. Sandra noticed it, and inside she felt the quiet strength of his humility. As they settled, silence hung between them for a moment. Not heavy, but thoughtful. Sometimes silence speaks more than words. Sandra broke it gently, saying, "It's been too long." Her voice carried warmth, but also a hint of sadness. Keanu nodded, his eyes calm but deep. Yes, too long. Maybe life wanted us to meet again, at the right moment. The waiter arrived, but both of them barely noticed the menu. Food was not the reason they were there. It was the unspoken emotions that had been waiting for years. Sandra asked about his life, and he spoke about solitude, about finding peace in small things, about helping strangers without expecting anything in return. She listened deeply, her heart touched by his honesty. She shared her own struggles, the times when fame felt like a cage, the nights when she cried alone despite the world thinking she had everything. In those moments, they were not stars, not icons. They were just two human beings who carried scars, who carried resilience, who carried kindness that refused to fade. But as their words flowed, an unexpected turn arrived. A young couple at a nearby table suddenly argued loudly. People turned, their heads. The man spoke harshly, his voice rising, while the woman's eyes filled with tears. The room's calmness broke. Sandra's face changed, concern filling her eyes. Keanu stayed silent for a moment, but then he stood up slowly and walked toward the table. No one expected it. He placed his hand gently on the man's shoulder and said softly, "Sometimes love is louder when spoken with respect." His voice was calm, not forceful, but it carried a weight that made everyone pause. The man froze, embarrassed, then lowered his tone. The woman wiped her tears, whispering thanks with her eyes. Keanu returned to his seat, quiet again, as if nothing had happened. Sandra looked at him. Her heart stirred. She whispered, "You've always been like this, always standing for others even in silence." Keanu gave a small smile. We are all broken, but kindness helps us stay whole. The evening was no longer just about dinner. It became a journey, a reminder of who they truly were when the world's lights were turned off. And for the first time, both wondered if this was only a meeting of old friends or the start of something no one expected. Shadows of the past. The night after their meeting, Keanu lay awake in his quiet apartment. The city outside moved with its usual noise, but inside, silence stretched like an ocean. He could not stop thinking about Sandra, her smile, her honesty, the way her eyes softened when she spoke about her struggles. It was not just nostalgia. It was something heavier, something that made his heart restless. He had known many people in his life, but few carried such light within them, and yet he felt a shadow he could not name. Sandra, too, returned home with her heart unsettled. She had lived through years of roles, awards, applause, and yet that single evening with Keanu felt more real than many years of her public life. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, wondering why her eyes seemed brighter, as if hope had returned from a long absence. But she also felt fear. Why now? Why after so many years of silence between them? The next day, Sandra called Keanu. Her voice was gentle, but she asked him something unusual. "Will you walk with me tomorrow? Not in a restaurant, not in front of others, just a walk. Somewhere quiet." Keanu agreed without hesitation. He always believed truth revealed itself, in the simplest places. They met at a small park far from the noise of flashing cameras. The trees whispered in the wind, and the path was lined with fallen leaves. Sandra walked beside him, their pace slow, like two souls searching for answers without rushing. After a while, she stopped and said, "Keanu, I need to ask you something that has stayed in my heart for years." He turned to her, his eyes steady. "Ask." She hesitated, her voice trembling. "When we worked together, did you ever feel what I felt? That there was something between us, something beyond friendship?" The words fell heavy in the air. Keanu stayed silent for a long moment, his face calm but his eyes deep with hidden pain. Finally, he whispered, "Yes, I felt it, but I never spoke, because sometimes silence protects more than words. You had your path, and I had mine. I thought maybe it was kinder to let it be." Sandra's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of release. "I thought I was alone in that feeling," she said softly. Keanu gave a faint smile. "You were never alone, but life has strange timing." Before the conversation could go deeper, something interrupted them. A small boy ran past, chasing a ball, and tripped on the path. He fell hard, scraping his knee, his cry piercing the calm. Sandra rushed to him immediately, kneeling beside him, while Keanu spoke softly to calm the child's fear. The boy's mother arrived moments later, flustered and worried. But instead of anger, Keanu offered a gentle reassurance. "He's strong. He will be fine. Every fall is a step toward standing taller." The mother smiled gratefully, her worry easing. As the boy walked away with his mother, Sandra looked at Keanu with admiration. "You always see the lesson in everything," she said. Keanu shook his head gently. "No, I just believe every pain has a seed of growth hidden inside." They continued walking, but now the air between them carried more weight, more truth. Sandra asked quietly, "Do you think it's too late for us? Too late to start something real?" Keanu looked at the path ahead, leaves scattered like fragments of old memories. "It is never too late for kindness, never too late for truth. But it is dangerous when hearts carry old wounds. We must be careful not to turn healing into hurt." Again, Sandra listened, her heart torn between hope and fear. She wanted to believe it was possible, yet she knew the world outside their quiet walk could crush gentle feelings under the weight of attention and gossip. Just then, a stranger recognized them from afar. Whispers began, and soon a small group gathered, some with phones ready to take pictures. Keanu instinctively stepped forward, shielding Sandra, his calmness protecting her from the crowd's noise. He spoke kindly to the people. "Please, let us have this moment as humans, not as names you know from screens." The crowd grew silent, moved by his humility, and slowly dispersed. Sandra stood in awe. "You never change. Even when the world tries to take pieces of you, you remain gentle." Keanu's voice was soft but steady. "Because if we lose kindness, we lose ourselves." The walk ended with silence, but not emptiness. It ended with questions, with the weight of feelings long, buried now rising to the surface. Sandra's heart beat with both fear and hope, while Keanu's heart carried calm, but also the awareness of storms that might come. And as they parted, neither of them knew that the days ahead would bring challenges that would test not just their bond, but their very understanding of love, respect, and resilience. The storm behind the calm, the next few days passed slowly, but inside both Keanu and Sandra, time did not move at all. Every word they had spoken during their walk stayed alive in their hearts, echoing again and again. Sandra found herself thinking about him while drinking her morning coffee, about his calm voice, about the way he shielded her from the crowd. Keanu, too, could not escape the memory of her tears, the way her question lingered. Is it too late for us? On the surface, they lived their normal lives. Sandra had projects to attend, meetings to join, scripts to read. Keanu kept his days simple, reading, writing, and sometimes quietly helping people no one noticed. But behind that surface, both of them carried the same thought. Perhaps life had brought them back for a reason. A few days later, Sandra sent him a message. Short, but heavy with meaning. "Let's not wait. Let's see where this goes." Keanu read it, his calm face hiding the storm inside. He replied, "Then let's meet again, somewhere honest, somewhere quiet." They chose a small bookstore hidden in an old street. The shop smelled of old pages and forgotten stories. It was almost empty, a perfect place for two souls who wanted to speak without masks. When Sandra arrived, Keanu was already there, sitting on the floor beside a shelf, reading a book of poems. She smiled at the sight because it was so him, simple, humble, untouched by the noise of fame. They talked about life, about dreams that never happened, about choices they had made. Their words were soft, but beneath them lay a current strong enough to change everything. Sandra finally said, "I am tired of pretending that we are only friends from the past. I feel something stronger, and it scares me because the world will not understand. They will turn it into gossip, into spectacle." Keanu closed the book, looked at her with steady eyes, and answered, "Then let us not live for the world. Let us live for what is real. The world will always talk, but only we will feel." Her heart trembled, because it was the first time he allowed his feelings to break through his silence. But just as hope began to bloom, a sudden twist arrived. A photographer appeared near the entrance of the bookstore, camera in hand. Sandra noticed him first, her face stiffened with worry. She whispered, "They found us." Keanu turned calmly, his expression unchanged, but his eyes sharp with awareness. The man lifted his camera, trying to capture the moment, to turn something private into a headline. Keanu stood, walked toward him, and instead of anger, spoke gently. "Please, do not take what is not yours. We are not stories to be sold. We are humans trying to breathe." The photographer hesitated. No one expected such calmness. But before Keanu could finish, another flash lit up the room. Someone else had already taken the shot from outside. Sandra's heart sank. She knew what would come next. Rumors, headlines, endless questions. They left the bookstore quietly, but the damage was already done. Within hours, social media buzzed with whispers. Keanu and Sandra together. Secret meeting. The world twisted their truth into curiosity and judgment. Sandra sat in her room that night, scrolling through the noise, tears in her eyes. She whispered, to herself, "This is what I feared." Keanu, in his own quiet space, read the same words, but instead of breaking, he closed his phone and whispered, "This is the test." The next day, Sandra called him, her voice heavy with fear. "Keanu, maybe we should stop. Maybe it's too dangerous. I don't want us to become a circus." He stayed silent for a moment, then said softly, "Sandra, storms will come whether we hide or not. But storms also show us who we are. We can run, or we can stand. It is your choice, and I will respect it." Her heart broke at his words, because she knew he was right. But still, she was afraid. Fame had its price, and she was not sure if she was ready to pay it again. And yet, in the silence of that night, she remembered his eyes, his calmness, his quiet strength. Something inside her whispered that walking away would not heal her. It would only leave her empty. The story of Keanu and Sandra was no longer just about friendship, no longer just about nostalgia. It had now become a battle between truth and fear, between the heart and the noise of the world. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew that the next step would decide everything. When the world turns its eyes, the morning after their quiet meeting turned into headlines, Sandra woke to her phone buzzing endlessly, messages from friends, calls from reporters, even emails from people she had not spoken to in years. The news had spread like wildfire. Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves spotted together in a hidden bookstore. Some reports were soft, painting it as a reunion of old friends, but others twisted it into gossip, weaving false stories of secret love, hidden drama, and past regrets. Sandra sat on her bed, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the noise. She had lived through this before: paparazzi, rumors, endless questions. But something felt different now. This was not just about her career. It was about something fragile, something real, something she feared could be destroyed before it even had a chance to grow. Keanu, in contrast, woke up calmly. His phone, too, was filled with messages, but he did not rush to answer. He brewed a cup of tea, sat near the window, and watched the light of dawn slowly fill the sky. He had lived long enough to know the world never stops talking, and silence was sometimes the loudest answer. Still, he thought about Sandra, about the fear that might be crushing her heart. Later that day, Sandra called him. Her voice was unsteady. "Keanu, I don't know if I can handle this again. They are already making up stories. I feel like I'm losing control." He listened quietly, then replied, "Sandra, you don't need to control the world. You only need to stay true to yourself. The noise will fade, but what we are building will stay if we protect it." His words were calm, but they carried weight. Still, Sandra felt the storm pressing on her. "But what if this ruins everything? Your peace, my work, our lives?" Keanu's voice softened. "Then maybe it is a test. Maybe it is asking us, how much is truth worth? Is it worth facing storms, or is it only worth when it is easy?" Sandra stayed silent, tears slipping down her cheeks. She wanted to believe him, but fear had its claws deep inside her. That evening, they decided to meet again, this time at Sandra's house. The lights were dim, the room warm, but her face carried the weight of the world. Keanu sat across from her, his calm presence steady as always. She looked at him and whispered, "Why are you not afraid? Why do you always stay so calm?" He leaned forward slightly, his eyes gentle yet firm. "Because I have already lost enough in life to know fear has no power unless we give it power." I choose calmness, not because I don't feel storms, but because storms cannot take away kindness. Sandra's heart ached at his words. She had always admired his strength, but now she began to see that it was not strength built from pride, but from wounds carried with dignity. Just as the moment began to soften, the doorbell rang. Sandra hesitated, worried it might be a reporter. But when she opened the door, it was her closest friend. The friend stepped inside quickly, her face filled with concern. "Sandra, you need to be careful. The press is everywhere. They are digging into the past, and they will not stop until they find something to hurt you." Keanu stood quietly in the corner, listening. The friend glanced at him, then turned back to Sandra. "I know you trust him, but are you ready for this fight? The world is cruel when it smells a story." Sandra looked at Keanu, then back at her friend. Her voice shook. "I don't know, but I know he is not the problem. The problem is my fear." The friend sighed, hugged her tightly, and whispered, "Then you must decide if your heart is stronger than your fear." After the friend left, Sandra sat back down, her hands shaking. Keanu reached across the table, not to hold her hand, but to let his presence speak. "We do not need to prove anything to the world. We only need to walk step by step, together or apart. The choice is yours." Her eyes filled with tears again. She whispered, "I don't want to walk apart." Those words brought a quiet relief, but also a new challenge. Because by choosing not to walk apart, they were also choosing to face the storm together. And outside, the storm was only growing louder. The weight of the world, the storm outside their private lives, grew faster than either of them imagined. Within days, magazines printed bold lines and talk shows debated their every move. Some voices celebrated the reunion of two beloved actors, calling it fate. Others twisted it, inventing scandals, digging into old interviews, pulling words out of context to feed endless curiosity. Sandra sat in her living room surrounded by piles of newspapers and glowing screens, all filled with her name next to his. The pressure pushed heavily against her chest, like chains pulling her down. She whispered to herself, "This is exactly what I feared." Keanu visited her that evening. When he entered, he saw her sitting silently, her hands covering her face. He placed a bag of groceries on the counter, as if life could still be simple, and quietly sat beside her. For a long moment he said nothing, only letting his presence calm the air. Finally he spoke. "Do not let their noise decide who you are. Their words are only shadows. They pass." Sandra lifted her eyes, tears flowing freely. "But they don't stop, Keanu. They never stop. I feel like every choice I make is being judged. I'm so tired." He listened with patience, then replied, "I know, but remember this. Storms are loud, but they always move on. What matters is what survives after the storm." Just then, her phone buzzed with another call. It was her agent, urging her to release a public statement. "You need to control the story, Sandra. If you don't, they will control it for you." She ended the call, her heart in turmoil. Should she speak or stay silent? Keanu, watching her, spoke softly. "Sometimes silence is stronger than defense. But if you speak, speak with honesty, not fear." His calmness gave her courage, but also left her with a heavy decision. The next day, Sandra attended a small charity event she had promised to support weeks earlier. As soon as she stepped out of the car, flashes exploded around her, reporters shouting questions. "Is it true? Are you and Keanu together? Are you hiding something? What does this mean for your career?" Her chest tightened, her voice almost broke, but then she remembered Keanu's words. Storms are loud, but they move on. She stopped, looked at the crowd, and with steady eyes she said, "Keanu is one of the kindest souls I have ever known. If the world wants to talk about kindness, let them. But if they want scandal, they will find none." Her voice carried strength, but her hands trembled as she walked away. When Keanu heard about it later, He smiled quietly. He admired her bravery, not because she spoke of him, but because she spoke her truth without bending to fear. But behind the bravery, the storm continued. Some praised her, others twisted her words again. The noise did not stop, it only grew louder. That night, Sandra called Keanu, her voice breaking. "I don't know how much longer I can carry this. Maybe we should end it now before it destroys us." Keanu closed his eyes, listening to the pain in her voice. After a pause, he said gently, "Sandra, endings don't protect us from pain. They only leave us with regret. The question is not whether the world accepts us. The question is whether we accept ourselves." His words sank into her heart, leaving her silent. In the days that followed, both of them faced the weight of judgment from every corner. Yet, in their private moments, they found something rare. When the world pushed, they found comfort in each other's presence. When the noise grew unbearable, they found silence together. And in that silence, something deeper grew. Something stronger than fear. But neither of them knew that a greater test was waiting ahead, one that would force them to decide once and for all if their bond was only a fragile hope or a truth worth fighting for no matter the cost. The breaking point. Storm finally reached a breaking point. What had started as whispers and headlines turned into a wave too strong to ignore. Tabloids published false stories, claiming secret betrayals, questioning their honesty, twisting every gesture they shared. Television hosts joked about them, and strangers on social media turned their lives into endless speculation. Sandra's career suddenly felt fragile. Studios called her agent, asking questions about her reputation, about whether she was distracted, about whether this scandal would harm upcoming projects. She sat in her office, staring at scripts that no longer felt alive. Her chest grew, heavy with the same fear she had carried for years, the fear of losing everything she had built. Keanu saw the pain in her eyes when he visited. He found her pacing the room, her hands trembling. "I can't breathe, Keanu. It's everywhere. They are tearing me apart." He stood still, calm as always, and waited until her voice cracked into silence. Then he said quietly, "Sandra, you are more than the world's noise. You are not their story. You are your own truth." She collapsed onto the couch, covering her face. "But my truth is costing me everything." Keanu sat beside her, his tone steady but heavy with feeling. "If your truth costs you the world, then maybe the world was never worth it. But if you give up your truth, you will lose yourself. And that loss is greater than anything fame can take." Tears streamed down her face. She wanted to believe him, but fear pressed harder. The breaking point came days later, when a false report claimed she had lied about her personal life for years. The story spread everywhere, casting shadows on her integrity. People, she thought, were friends, began to distance themselves, afraid of being pulled into the storm. Sandra called Keanu that night, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can keep fighting this. I feel like I'm drowning." He listened quietly, then replied with words soft but unshakable. "Then let me carry some of the weight. You don't have to fight alone." The next morning, Keanu did something no one expected. He agreed to a rare interview, something he almost never did. When asked about the rumors, he looked directly at the camera and spoke with calm clarity. "Sandra is one of the most genuine people I know. She does not need to defend her truth, because her life already speaks for it. I will stand by her, not because of rumors, not because of headlines, but because respect and kindness matter more than noise." The world paused. His words spread everywhere, but this time the tone changed. People who admired his honesty began to question the lies they had been fed. Strangers online defended them, speaking about the importance of kindness over gossip. The storm did not disappear, but its power weakened. When Sandra saw the interview, she broke down. She called him, tears in her voice. "Why did you do that? You hate the spotlight?" Keanu answered gently. "Because sometimes love is not silence. Sometimes it is standing in the storm for someone else." Her heart trembled. She had always known his strength, but now she saw his sacrifice. He had given up the privacy he valued most just to protect her. That night, as they sat together in quietness, Sandra whispered, "I'm afraid the world will never let us be at peace." Keanu took her hand, his touch firm yet gentle. "Peace is not given by the world. It is chosen inside us, and I choose it with you." But even as they held on to each other, both of them knew the final test was still ahead. The storm had calmed, but the scars remained, and the last step would not only decide their bond, but also redefine how they face the world forever. The truth that lasts, weeks passed since Keanu's rare interview. The storm outside did not vanish, but its fire no longer burned as fiercely. The noise of the world became an echo instead of a roar. Still, scars remained, and Sandra often wondered if they had survived only to face another wave again someday. She sat with Keanu one evening on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The night was calm and the stars shone faintly above. She leaned on the railing, her voice low. "Sometimes I wonder if we are fighting against something too big. The world always finds a way to take pieces of us." Keanu turned to her, his expression gentle. "Yes, the world will always take what it can, but it cannot take what we refuse to give. It cannot take our respect, our kindness, or our truth. Those belong only to us." His words carried her heart into silence, and she realized he was right. Fame, gossip, and judgment were loud, but they were temporary. Truth was quiet, but it lasted. A few days later, they decided to do something together, not for themselves, but for others. Instead of hiding, they visited a children's hospital, quietly, without cameras, without press. They spent hours sitting with young patients, listening to their stories, laughing with them, giving them strength. For the first time in weeks, Sandra felt free. She saw how the children's eyes lit up, not because of who they were on screen, but because of the kindness they brought in that moment. On the way back, she whispered to Keanu, "This is what matters. Not the headlines, not the noise. Just this, being able to give something real." He smiled softly. "Yes, when we give, we become whole." Their bond grew stronger, not because the world accepted them, but because they chose to stand together, through fear, through storms, and through the silence that followed. One evening, as they walked along a quiet path, Sandra stopped suddenly. Her eyes filled with tears, but her smile was steady. "Keanu, I was afraid for so long. I thought if I let myself care for you again, I would lose everything. But now I see the truth. I don't need to win the world. I only need to walk with you." Keanu looked at her, his calm eyes carrying all the storms he had faced. He stepped closer and said softly, "And I will walk with you, through every shadow and every light." Their hands met, not in dramatic passion, but in quiet strength. In that moment, it was no longer about the past, no longer about fame, no longer about fear. It was about two souls choosing kindness, respect, and truth, no matter the cost. The world would still talk, as it always does. But for Keanu and Sandra, the noise faded. What remained was something simple, something strong, something no one expected. Love built not on spectacle, but on humility, resilience, and the quiet power of kindness. And for the first time in years, both of them felt peace, not because the storm had ended, but because they had learned how to stand in the middle of it together.